Did you know that giraffes used to be short? That humans share a lot of their DNA with bananas? And that we all, including you, are the product of millions of years of evolution? Guess, if you think you know it all about evolution, guess again. Here are 10 amazing facts about how evolution actually works that might just surprise you. Number 1, evolution only works on individuals. At least, that's the impression given by the subtitle of a book called Why We Get Sick, which explores how our behaviors have evolved over time and made us more susceptible to certain diseases. But while the subtitle says individuals, the author actually means groups of individuals. Groups of animals or plants don't evolve, only populations do. Populations are groups of the same species living in the same area at the same time. So when we say that evolution only works on individuals, what we really mean is that evolution happens because of changes in the gene pool of a population. The gene pool is the sum total of all the genes and all the different versions of those genes within a population. And individuals are born with 2 copies of most of their genes, one from each parent. During sexual reproduction, individuals shuffle these genes into new combinations when they make sperm or egg cells. So the gene pool gets reshuffled with every generation. Sometimes, though, an individual has a genetic mutation, a random change in its DNA sequence. Most mutations are harmful, but some are beneficial. A beneficial mutation arises that helps an individual survive and reproduce. Then the next generation will have more of that helpful version of that gene than the last generation did. And that's evolution in action. Number 2, evolution doesn't always work in the way you'd expect. You might think that natural selection always favors the best adapted organisms, but that's not necessarily true. Consider the peppered moth. These moths live in Great Britain and come in 2 colors, light and dark. Before the Industrial Revolution, light-colored moths were doing well, probably because they were camouflaged against light-colored trees. Dark moths were easy prey for predatory birds and not very common. After the Industrial Revolution, pollution darkened the tree trunks. Light-colored moths were now easy to spot against the dark bark, and dark moths were camouflaged. So the tables turned, and the dark moths began to thrive. This is an example of natural selection at work. But it wasn't a simple case of the best adapted surviving. Instead, the environment changed, and different traits became advantageous. Also, remember that evolution isn't goal-oriented. It isn't going somewhere or trying to achieve anything. Evolution doesn't have a purpose. It simply happens as a result of the interactions between organisms and their environments and the genetic mutations that occur over time. No. 3. Living things don't evolve. Only populations can evolve, and only over many generations. So while you may have heard people refer to evolution as humans becoming smarter or giraffes evolving longer necks, this is really just shorthand for saying that populations have evolved. Their offspring have accumulated beneficial genetic variants that make them smarter or have longer necks. You yourself aren't any smarter than your parents or any more evolved. You just carry slightly different versions of some of their genes. No. 4. There are lots of ways to measure how fit a particular gene variant is. When we talk about evolution, we often focus on an organism's ability to survive and reproduce, or its fitness. But there are other ways to measure fitness. A gene that allows an animal to survive longer also allows it to pass on its genes for longer, making it more fit. But a gene that allows an animal to reproduce more quickly could also be considered fit, because that speeds up the process of passing on genes, too. It's all about relative fitness. If a trait makes an organism better at surviving or reproducing, then it's more fit. And fitness isn't just about being the biggest, strongest, or fastest. It's about reproductive success. 2 organisms could be equally fit, even if they read very different, because they read both good at passing on their genes. Take, for example, a peacock and a zebra. A peacock's elaborate tail ornaments may attract mates, but zebra's stripes are thought to help them regulate their body temperature. Both traits help them reproduce, so both could be considered fit. No. 5. Evolution isn't always slow. It can happen fast. In 1998, scientists discovered an interesting lizard in the Indian Ocean on the island of Samoa. It was a subspecies of the common brown NOL that had evolved into a new species in just 150 years. Since then, scientists have confirmed that it is indeed a new species. This new species evolved through rapid speciation, where a new species arises from an ancestral one in a relatively short period of time. Rapid speciation can happen when populations experience strong selective pressures, like a dramatic change in the environment, disease, or when they start interbreeding with other species. The Samoan anoles are thought to have speciated so quickly because they were isolated from other anoles on remote islands. They evolved unique adaptations to survive in their environment, like living in the undergrowth instead of trees and having more limbs than their relatives on other islands. Number 6. Evolution isn't progress. It isn't directed towards bigger, more complex, or more intelligent creatures. Some organisms have been around for millions of years without changing much. For example, bacteria have been on Earth for at least 3 billion years. And fossils tell us that horseshoe crabs have been around for at least 200 million years. Horseshoe crabs look pretty much the same today as they did back then. And they haven't necessarily been getting better or worse adapted. They've just been fine. As long as organisms are suited to their environments and able to reproduce, they tend to stick around for a long time, even if they don't change much. And if an environment changes and a species can't keep up, they can go extinct. But that's not necessarily progress either. Extinction isn't necessarily bad. It's just another part of the evolutionary process. No. 7. You share a lot of your DNA with bananas. People and bananas are very different, right? Okay? Well, yes, but we're also very similar. We both belong to the kingdom Plantae. The differences between us came later, okay? And the traits that define us, like the ability to walk upright, didn't arise from nothing, okay? Those traits arose from variations that already existed in the gene pool. Our closest living relatives, chimpanzees, can walk upright too, albeit not as elegantly. Humans and chimps diverged from a gibbon-like ancestor that also walked upright. So, the trait arose before our lineage split off from theirs. So we all share a lot of the same genetic material, okay? But we also share a lot of our DNA with fungi, bacteria, and single-cell organisms. All life on Earth is related. We all share a common ancestor deep in the past. So, the more closely related two species are, the more DNA they share. The last time humans shared a common ancestor with bananas was about 600 million years ago. Since then, we've gone our separate ways, but we still share 50% of our DNA. No, 8. Your body has parts from ancient ancestors. If you have a bacterial infection, you might take antibiotics to kill the bacteria, but you also might inadvertently kill some of your own cells, because it turns out that you contain many more bacterial genes than you do human ones. Over millions of years, genes from bacteria and other single-cell organisms have found their way into the genomes of multi-cell organisms like plants and animals. Scientists call these genes HGTs, or horizontal gene transfers. Bacteria are especially notorious for sneaking their genes into other organisms. Perhaps this is why you get sick when you eat food that's gone bad. Bacteria in the food might be transferring genes to you, and some of those genes might make you sick. But not all HGTs are harmful. Plants have picked up genes from bacteria that help them defend themselves against pests and pathogens. Animals have acquired genes from bacteria that help them digest food. And humans have acquired genes from bacteria that may help us fight cancer. So we all carry parts of our ancient ancestors inside us. No, 9 genes can jump species. Remember that humans and bananas last shared a common ancestor about 600 million years ago. Well, some genes were transferred between lineages after that. So some banana genes are actually more closely related to human genes than they are to genes in other parts of the banana genome. And this isn't unique to bananas. Genes have jumped between species throughout history. Okay. This can happen when a virus infects an organism and incorporates some of its host sDNA into its own genome and then passes those genes along to the next host. But genes don't always stay put once they jump species. They can jump again. In fact, scientists have found genes in the human genome that originated in bacteria and have moved from person to person for millions of years. 10. It's impossible to know exactly how evolution works. We can observe evolution in action in some cases, like with the peppered moth, or in the lab when scientists intentionally select for certain traits in fruit flies. But in most cases, we can't actually see evolution happening. Instead, we infer it from the fossil record, which is incomplete, or by comparing the DNA of living organisms. But even with modern technology, we can't read DNA sequences perfectly. So the more genetic difference there is between two species, the harder it is to figure out when those differences arose. Even worse, we can't study every organism on Earth, not even close. There are millions of species that we haven't even discovered yet, let alone studied. It's impossible to know exactly how evolution works. Can't even agree on exactly what the first steps in the process were. The history of life on Earth stretches back billions of years. And while we've learned a lot, there's still so much more to discover. But that's part of what makes evolution such an exciting field of science. There's always something new to learn. If you want to learn more about the incredible process of evolution, check out the resources. And if you enjoyed this video, share it with your friends and family.